Welcome to the Fear and Greed Daily Interview. I'm Sean Aylmer. Every day we're talking about the rising cost of living. Interest rates, power bills, grocery prices, petrol. Households are being hit hard and it's not over yet. Are there any solutions to the crisis? Well, yesterday Commonwealth Bank brought together a panel to look at how behavioural science can help. I'm joined by two of the panellists today, Commonwealth Bank Chief Behavioural Scientist William Mailer and Professor David Halpern, the CEO of the UK's Behavioural Insights Team, the Nudge Unit, established in 2010 to advise the UK government on applying behavioural science to public policy. William, David, welcome to Fear and Greed.
Hi, nice to be here.
Thank you for having us.
Okay, so before I get into it, let's start with a definition. What exactly is behavioural science?
Right, well, maybe I should lead off on that one. It's basically trying to systematically understand what drives our behaviour, our decisions, and so on. It might seem like, we just kind of know that. We're human beings. But we've learned a lot in the last, not just 10, 20 years, but over the last century, where we can sort of more systematically understand, for example, the mental shortcuts that drive our behaviour and help to explain some of the kind of puzzles, like why is it we never get to the gymnasium and why do we kind of eat less healthily than we should do and why don't we save more money, and actually that we can understand ourselves and the way in which our mental shortcuts that drive our behaviour, essentially. You can use that for good or for bad.
Okay, David, keep going on this. And it's not just a societal issue, it's become a sort of function of economics as well, hasn't it?
Very much so. So yes, behavioural economics often talked about. So a lot of economic models were based on some notion of people were, fully rational. We got all perfect information. We can make perfect decisions. But as we know, that's pretty unrealistic. And in particularly the work of Danny Kahneman and others, starting from, actually even in the 80s, 70s and 80s, reincorporated into economics to make a more realistic model of what actually drives our behaviour. So in particular, we tend to think, Danny Kahneman famously popularized through the notion of thinking fast and thinking slow, that most of the decisions aren't kind of perfectly weighed. Most of the decisions we make as we run around our lives, busy doing things, often using kind of relatively fast thinking, which works a lot of the time, the mental shortcut, but sometimes trips us up and makes errors.
Okay. William, bringing you into this, why does a bank like the Commonwealth Bank need a chief behavioural scientist? I think David's probably partly answered that question, but I want to hear from you.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think picking up on what David was saying, we may have these great goals of saving more for retirement or spending less, but then we go out in the day-to-day world and we can behave and spend in ways that actually work against those goals. So the first part is understanding why, and I think that's a lot of the science and the history around the behavioural sciences. But the second part for a team like mine is then, what do you do with that, and how do you design better products, information, tools, services that actually help customers stick to those goals and get there more easily and make better decisions and have less regret around what they've spent or how little they've saved.
Okay. So, I think this is going to be a good conversation, David, because I in a sense, you can give us the big picture and William, you can tell us how it does apply to real life via the Commonwealth Bank in a sense. The cost of living, we're all talking about it at the moment, and obviously energy prices are high, mortgage repayments are much higher, as fruit and veggies in Australia due to floods, things like that are much higher. How can behavioural science work in terms of alleviating cost of living pressures? Perhaps starting with you, David.
Sure. Well, behavioural science isn't going to suddenly lower the energy price or stop the war in Ukraine. Or maybe it could, that would be good. But people often reach to, what are the things you can do? Like, can you teach people to be, have more financial skills and literacy and so on? You can do a certain amount of that. But actually, what often you can really do is you can make the world, for example, more legible, right? So it's easier to understand, to take the friction out so that people, for example, where there's money on the table in relation to, on energy specifically, many countries now have subsidies, but many people aren't claiming them, which seems weird and paradoxical, and often because there's kind of frictional barriers that get in the way, and they turn out to be really important. So can we, like in other domains, you can try, it would be nice to run faster, etc. You can train people to run a bit faster. But in the end, it's like, well, why don't we give someone a bicycle? What can we do to kind of aids, essentially, which mean we can be more effective? So a lot of the behavioural science not is only just aimed, as it were, back inside ourselves to be more effective in decision making, but it's to make a world within which it is easier to make good decisions.
And within the Commonwealth Bank, then, Will, are you seeing, is the bank itself making changes? Are you seeing changed behaviour by consumers that you think, we can react to that to actually take some of that friction out?
Yeah, I think in a lot of ways we've been looking at this for quite a long time, but it's never been more important than it is, I think, in the current climate. So David and I were talking the other day about the idea of inertia. So we've all probably got a whole bunch of subscriptions that are just ticking away in the background and debiting our account. And because of our human limitations, we probably don't review that every day, and we don't make those decisions all the time. And inertia means we get stuck in these habits, and sometimes we need a reminder or a tool that helps us address that. So the Commonwealth Bank will provide you all of your recurring payments in one spot that you can easily look at and change. A big area we've been looking at is the huge amount of unclaimed government benefits and services that are available to people. And how do you reduce the social stigma, increase the awareness, and reduce the barriers for people that just have busy lives and probably don't have the time to go through all the forms and paperwork to get to those benefits? A final example I'll give you is this idea that we may want to do something tomorrow, but when tomorrow comes, we just don't follow through. And this is a pattern that the behavioural sciences have showed over and over again with human behaviour. So we look at tax refunds, for example, here at the Commonwealth Bank. People may want to put that to savings or debt when it arrives in 6 months' time. But then when the money hits the account, we spend it in different ways. We may feel good or bad about that. So we develop a service, again, that works with human behaviour, helps customers to lock in that good intention ahead of time. And then when the money arrives, it's already been applied in the way that people intended it to. And we take that temptation away to spend it in other ways.
Stay with me. We'll be back in a minute. My guests today are Commonwealth Bank Chief Behavioural Scientist William Mailer and Professor David Halpern, CEO of the UK's Behavioural Insights team. I'm trying to work out, Will, whether it's about changing consumer behaviour or kind of better implementing what they want to do, or they say they want to do.
Exactly right. I think a lot of what we're doing is actually just removing barriers and helping people to get to where they want to go. The world's an incredibly busy and noisy place. Decisions are very complex, and sometimes important information is hard to find. So the easier we can make it for customers to get to their goals in the way that they want to and remove those behavioural barriers, that's kind of the plan here.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the Commonwealth Bank is doing it. And David, you've done work with banks overseas, also Downing Street you mentioned. What about local governments here, plural, as in state governments, local governments and federal government? Is it something that they're thinking about? Maybe that is for Will or David, either of you.
Well, some are. I mean, actually here in New South Wales, you have the fantastic Victor Dominello, who I think has been a great champion and quite active on the government side of trying, how can you kind of benefit finders type thing. What's great about, I'm a big fan of what the Commonwealth Bank have been doing, is, well, actually, who else is out there that you're using regularly that actually can proactively help you rather than you have to go somewhere else to find this? And just to set a tiny bit of background, I mean, you mentioned, we've worked with, I looked at both with banks and often with regulators in a number of places. And most banks have a bit of a decision, right? Are they there to kind of use behavioral science to work out just how much they can get away with charging you and sneak an extra thing in when you do your exchange, whatever it would be?
Yep.
Or are they there actually to kind of help you out and help you find a better product or connect you, with a benefit, or to point out, I mean, the average American, for example, is between $100 and $150 a month on subscriptions. And nearly a half of them have subscriptions which they thought they'd cancelled. Like, your bank is perfectly placed to say, oh, by the way, do you still want all these things? You click here.
Yeah.
Make it easy. So it could be done by government, but often there's someone else you're already engaging with respect to your financial behaviour who is not government.
Okay. I mean, banks get a bad run from we in the media, no doubt about it, but I'm sure 99.9% of bankers are actually there for customers, trying to do the right thing, Commonwealth Bank and your competitors as well. This seems to me to be a fairly tangible way of doing it, Will.
Absolutely. And we're very much an empirical team, so we're constantly measuring and testing what we're doing and trying to understand the impact we're having for our customers and for the business. We're a team of around 20. Within the team, we've got a mix of psychologists, economists, data scientists and designers. We work very closely with the AI professionals within the bank, as well as kind of obviously the product teams and the digital service teams. So it's really behavioral science, and applied behavioral science particularly, is very multidisciplinary in nature. We also partner very closely with research groups around the world, community groups, to understand what's the most important financial well-being and behavioural problem today, as well as government, as you mentioned, and the behavioural units within government.
David, where does this go? So, I mean, behavioural science isn't new, but in terms of applying it in a business sense or a government sense, it's not that old either. My background is in economics. I've done a bit of behavioural economics, and at the end of the day, if you incentivize someone to do it, they do it. It's kind of as simple as that, I think. Surely there's a long way forward to go, not just in banking, but in retail, in potentially in mining, to kind of introduce behavioural science to get more efficient outcomes.
Yeah, I mean, a key question is, what is there beyond incentives? Good, well-trained economist there. It turns out there's lots of other things which matter too. The way in which you say something or do something, even the effectiveness of companies is often to do with the personal dynamics and how they operate. Incidentally, often the way of motivating your workers, for example, is not just to use money. In fact, often it's not particularly effective. Much better off to say, God, you did a great job. Human beings, eh? So it's getting us into that world. By the way, I do think Commonwealth Bank, I'm quite positive about what they're doing. I think that they stand out. A lot of big banks are still basically stuck with rent seeking, but there are also some challenger banks who are kind of pushing the frontiers too. So an example would be, other parts of expenditure. If you want to stop yourself gambling, why can't your financial, you can't say your bank, for God's sake, I don't want to gamble anymore. Or even other kinds of shopping. There are people, actually most people, but especially people who have mental health issues. If you're up in the middle of the night buying stuff online, how many people think that they bought something between the hours of 1 o'clock in the morning and 6 o'clock in the morning, and then afterwards thought that was great? So you might want to say, can I just set it so I literally can't buy anything in those hours? And then you get into the psychology of, well, what happens when you change your mind? And how does the bank handle that? So you might design what are called commitment devices, where you'd say, you know what, if I change my mind, I have to say, like on the gambling, yes, I want to spend all my kids' money and I'm a bad parent, and I'll write that out 5 times. You said it for yourself, or a text goes to your mum saying, actually, I've decided that I do want to start gambling again. You sort of slightly playful examples, but they're not entirely. How do you get to design, as it were, the commitment device for yourself, which then kind of tallies with the financial provider? But you're right, can it be applied? I mean, almost every issue which we face in policy certainly involves human behavior. Our health behavior, we lose on average 10 years of life, nearly all for health and lifestyle factors. Saving the planet, the estimate is it's nearly 2/3 of what we have to do in relation to achieve net zero involves behavior change, either because we have to change, eat less red meat, whatever, or we have to adopt new kinds of technology, so on and so on. So, getting people back to employment, or a famous example Obama used to talk about was, it's pretty hard to pass a law in Congress or in, Canberra, wherever, and get kids to turn off the TV and do their homework, right? Most stuff, when you look at it, involves human behavior. And the weird thing is, for policymakers, why the hell didn't we get that earlier?
Yeah. Plenty to think about. William, David, thank you for talking to Fear and Greed.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
That was Commonwealth Bank Chief Behavioural Scientist William Aylmer and Professor David Halpern, CEO of the UK's Behavioural Insights team. This is the Fear and Greed Daily Interview. Join us every morning for the full episode of Fear and Greed, Australia's most popular business podcast. I'm Sean Aylmer. Enjoy your day.